The morning mist rolled thick across the valley, swallowing the trees, the rocks, even the faint outline of the mountains beyond. It was here, deep in this forgotten corner of the world, that a group of travelers stumbled upon something they were never meant to see. At first it was only a shadow, a faint silhouette rising through the fog, tall, jagged, almost ghostly. But as the wind shifted and the veil of mist parted, the shape revealed itself. A castle it stood high on a lonely hill, its towers broken but defiant, its walls blackened with centuries of storms. Yet there was something strange about it. Unlike the ruins scattered across Europe, this place felt untouched. No birds nested in its turrets. No ivy crept across its stone. It was as though time itself had circled around this place, refusing to step inside. The travelers approached carefully, their footsteps crunching on the wet earth. As they drew closer, the silence grew heavier. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. A broken wooden gate lay across the path, cracked, but still strong enough to bear the marks of a royal crest, a crest no one recognized. When they stepped inside the courtyard, they froze. Everything was exactly as it might have been 5 centuries ago. A cart stood beside the wall, its wooden wheels preserved as if carved yesterday. A rusted sword leaned against the gate, its blade dulled but strangely intact. And on the ground, half buried in the mud, lay a silver goblet, glinting faintly in the pale morning light. But the most unsettling thing of all was the air itself. It was heavy, almost thick, as though they had stepped not just into another place, but into another time. One of the travelers whispered, "It feels like they just left," but no voices answered. The castle loomed silently above them, its empty windows like watching eyes, daring them to step further inside. In that moment, they realized they had not merely discovered a ruin. They had walked into a story abandoned mid-sentence, a chapter of history that time itself had tried to erase. And whatever had happened here, it was waiting for them still. Long before the castle was swallowed by fog and silence, it had been alive, with voices, music, and power. Its stone halls once echoed with the footsteps of kings, queens, and nobles, whose names have all but vanished from history. The locals still whisper fragments of those forgotten rulers, a dynasty that seemed destined for greatness, yet disappeared without a trace. The castle, according to scattered chronicles, belonged to a house of immense wealth. They were not mere lords, they were rulers who commanded respect and fear. Their banners, woven in crimson and gold, once fluttered proudly from the towers. Their banquets were legendary, with tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, golden chalices of wine, and music that lasted till dawn. But beneath the glittering surface lay something darker. Travelers of the time wrote of rulers obsessed with power far beyond the crown, men and women who delved into alchemy, who spoke of bending time itself. One queen, it was said, wore a necklace rumored to contain the sands of an ancient hourglass, gifted to her by an Eastern mystic. Another lord was whispered to have locked himself for years inside a hidden chamber, chasing the secret of eternal life. The villagers at the edge of the forest knew better than to venture too close. They spoke of strange lights flickering in the castle windows long after midnight, of chants carried on the wind, as though the royals were summoning forces unseen. Some believed they had bargained with shadows, trading loyalty for forbidden power. And yet, for all their secrets, the dynasty ruled unchallenged. Their lands flourished, their armies grew, and no enemy dared to cross their walls. To the outside world, it seemed as if nothing could bring down this house of stone and steel. But inside, the cracks had already begun to form. Brothers turned against brothers, alliances shattered. Whispers of betrayal spread through the court like poison. The queen's necklace, once a symbol of glory, became a source of dread. Servants swore they saw it glow faintly in the dark, pulsing like a living heart. Others believed the royals had made a pact with something that demanded more than they were willing to give. The chronicles end abruptly, as if the scribes themselves were silenced. No record tells of their downfall. No grave marks their resting place. Only the castle remains, standing as if frozen at the very moment their story ended. And so, their voices linger in the stones, whispers of forgotten royals, rulers whose hunger for eternity may have condemned them to it was a night meant for celebration. The grand hall was filled with music, the flicker of torches dancing across gilded walls, and the laughter of nobles echoing beneath vaulted ceilings. Servants rushed between tables, pouring wine into golden cups, carrying platters of roasted meats and fruits, while the musicians played melodies that spiraled into the air like smoke. And then, silence. Not the slow fading silence of a party's end, but something sudden, unnatural, like the world itself had drawn in a sharp breath, and never let it go. Chroniclers never described what happened that night. All that remains are fragments: a banquet table abandoned mid-feast, goblets of wine, half-raised food, left untouched, as if time itself had stopped in an instant. A lute lay broken on the floor, its final note unheard. The torches still burned in their sconces, as though waiting for their masters to return. Some say a scream was heard, a single, piercing cry that tore through the night, followed by a silence so deep that even the forest outside grew still. Others speak of a thunderclap, though no storm raged in the sky, and then, nothing. The castle, once alive with voices, never spoke. Again. When villagers ventured near the next morning, they found the gates open, but inside there were no people, no guards, no nobles. Clothes lay scattered, as if shed in haste, jewelry glimmered on tables, and documents remained unfinished. It was as if every living soul had vanished, not fled, not fought, but simply ceased to exist. One peasant told of walking into the great dining hall and finding every chair pushed back at once, as though the entire gathering had risen in unison. Another claimed the royal throne stood empty, yet warm to the touch, as if someone had just risen moments before. The church later declared it the work of a plague, a punishment from God. But no bodies were ever found. No bones, no graves, not even the smell of death lingered in the air. Others believed the royals had completed the pact they had whispered about for generations. That night, they had finally crossed into another realm, leaving the mortal world behind. Whatever truth hides in those stone walls, it remains buried beneath silence. A castle once filled with life became a tomb without corpses, a place where the clocks stopped, the candles froze in their wax, and time itself refused to move forward. That was the night the castle fell silent. Forever. Long after the castle was abandoned, the villagers who lived in the valleys below began to whisper of a curse. They said that the royals, in their hunger for eternal power, had called upon forces no mortal was meant to command, and when the final night came, those forces answered. The legend tells of a shadow that swept through the halls. Unseen yet all-consuming, servants dropped where they stood, nobles froze with goblets still in hand, and even the animals' horses in their stables, hounds by the fire, fell into a silence deeper than death. It was not life, nor death, but something in between, an eternal sleep. Some villagers swore that on moonless nights, when the mist grew thickest, they could see faint figures in the windows, nobles in glittering robes, moving as though the banquet had never ended. A queen raising her jeweled hand to toast, a musician bowing to play, a servant carrying a tray. But when morning came, the windows were empty once more. Generations passed, and still the tales persisted. Children were warned never to stray near the castle gates, for fear they too would be swallowed by the curse. Hunters told of hearing laughter echoing through the trees, followed by the sound of music fading into nothing. Travelers claimed that the moment they crossed the threshold, their hearts grew heavy, as though time itself pressed against their chests. The priests called it punishment, the price for the royals. Arrogance in seeking immortality. The scholars called it plague, insisting the villagers' stories were nothing more than superstition. But neither priests nor scholars could explain why the castle remained untouched by centuries. Why wood did not rot, why iron did not crumble, why even the tapestries still clung to the walls. Their colors faded, but their fabric intact, to the villagers. There was only one answer: the curse. They believed the royals still slept somewhere within those stone walls, their bodies preserved, their souls trapped in a dream without end. The castle, they said, was not abandoned. It was alive, watching, waiting, and so, the curse of eternal sleep became the castle's legacy, a legend so powerful that even today, those who pass through the valley look up at the fog-covered towers with unease, for in the silence of those stones, they swear they can still hear the faint sound of breathing. The explorers hesitated at the great wooden doors, their hands trembling as they pushed against the ancient timbers. With a groan, the doors opened, releasing a gust of air that felt heavy, stale, almost otherworldly, as if it had been trapped for centuries. Inside, silence ruled. Not the silence of an empty ruin, but a suffocating stillness, as though every breath, every sound, was swallowed whole by the stone walls. The explorers lit their lanterns, and the flickering glow revealed a scene that defied reason. The castle was not in ruins. Dust clung to every surface. Cobwebs draped across the rafters, but the world inside looked as though its inhabitants had left only moments ago. Long dining tables still stretched across the great hall, laden with silver plates and tarnished goblets. Some plates even held the blackened remains of meals that had never been finished, as if the feast had ended mid-bite. In the corner, a wooden harp leaned against the wall, its strings snapped, but its body still gleaming faintly. Tattered banners hung from the ceiling, their colors muted but recognizable, displaying the crest of a dynasty that no one could name. But it was the smaller details that chilled the blood. A child's wooden toy lay abandoned on the stairs. A cloak hung neatly on a rack, its fabric untouched by moths. In one chamber, the explorers found an hourglass on a desk, its sands frozen halfway through, as though time itself had refused to let the last grains fall. And then there were the clocks all throughout the castle. They found them on mantelpieces, in chambers, beside beds. Every clock, though different in shape and size, pointed to the same hour, midnight, their hands unmoving, as if bound by some invisible force. The deeper the explorers ventured, the stronger the feeling became. This was no mere ruin. It was a place suspended, caught between the living and the dead. The air grew colder with every step. The walls seemed to close in, and a heavy pressure pressed upon their chests, as though warning them to turn back. One of them whispered, "It feels like the castle is watching us." And in that moment, the lantern flickered. For a heartbeat, the shadows on the walls seemed to shift, forming shapes that did not belong to any of the men present. Then, as quickly as it came, the moment passed. But the explorers knew one thing: whatever had happened here had not truly ended. The castle was waiting, guarding its secrets in those frozen halls. The explorers had seen enough to know the castle was no ordinary ruin. Yet something compelled them deeper, toward a section of the fortress that seemed hidden, almost concealed from the world. At the end of a narrow, crumbling corridor, behind a tapestry so worn its colors had nearly vanished, they discovered a small iron door. Unlike the other rooms, this one was locked tight, its hinges blackened with age. When they forced it open, the air that poured out was colder than ice. Their lanterns flickered, as though reluctant to reveal what lay beyond. The chamber was small, circular, and carved into the very heart of the stone. Strange symbols etched into the walls glimmered faintly, their patterns twisted and unreadable, as if written in a language long forgotten. In the center stood a stone altar, cracked but intact, and upon it lay objects that defied explanation: a blackened crown, a dagger crusted with rust, and a book bound in leather so brittle it looked ready to crumble to dust. But the most unsettling object of all was the mirror, tall, framed in gold, that had long tarnished. It leaned against the far wall. Its glass was unbroken, but the surface rippled faintly, like water disturbed by a breath of wind. One explorer stepped closer and froze. His reflection did not move with him. Instead, the figure in the glass remained still, its face pale, its eyes hollow. They fled from the mirror, only to discover more rooms beyond. Chambers filled with jars of strange powders, flasks sealed with wax, and parchment covered in diagrams of circles, stars, and markings that looked like maps of the heavens. This was no simple castle. It was a place of study, of ritual, and then came the crypt, beneath the forbidden chambers. Down a stairwell of stone, so steep it seemed to plunge into the earth itself, they found rows of coffins. Yet, unlike any burial they had seen before, these coffins were not sealed. Each lay open, empty, as though waiting. Some bore names carved into their lids, but the writing had been deliberately scratched out, leaving only scars in the wood. Explorers realized then why the villagers had called it cursed. The royals had not merely ruled, they had sought to master death, to command time, to trap their very souls within stone walls. The castle was not just a home, it was a prison, a vault of secrets no mortal should ever open. And as the lanterns dimmed, one thought haunted them all. Perhaps the forbidden chambers had never been meant to be found. For centuries, the castle stood untouched, its walls a puzzle for all who gazed upon it. Folklore whispered of curses and eternal sleep. But when scholars and archaeologists finally dared to investigate, they uncovered traces that blurred the line between legend and truth. The first evidence came from the soil itself. Beneath the courtyard, diggers found layers of ash, not from fire, but from something fire, like powdered stone or bone. Mixed within were fragments of glass, melted into strange shapes, as if the very earth had been scorched by an unnatural heat. No record spoke of a fire, yet the castle bore scars that could not be explained by time alone. Inside the great hall, they discovered carvings beneath the plaster. Hidden behind layers of paint, symbols emerged, circles within circles, constellations mapped in obsessive detail. One astronomer argued they were charts of the heavens, marking not only the stars of the night sky, but movements of planets and eclipses centuries ahead of their time. Who could have drawn them, and why? Then came the relics. In the forbidden chambers, archaeologists uncovered remnants of powders and minerals unknown in the region. Some resembled ingredients used in alchemy, others resisted identification altogether. The ancient book, brittle but legible in places, hinted at rituals, meant to manipulate not life, but time itself. Phrases like "to bind the hourglass" and "to seal the breath of night" suggested practices far beyond the realm of simple superstition. Yet for every discovery, the mystery only deepened. The villagers claimed the royals had succeeded, that they had stopped time within their walls, escaping death itself. Skeptics dismissed it as folklore, but how could one explain the food preserved on plates, the wood that refused to rot, the fabric that had survived when it should have crumbled to dust centuries ago? Even the clocks offered no answer. Experts tested their gears and mechanisms, but found nothing unusual. And yet, each one froze at the same exact moment, midnight. Some researchers proposed a plague, so sudden it left no trace. Others argued for mass poisoning, or even an invasion erased from history. But none of these theories could explain the silence that lingered. The sense that the walls themselves remembered something humanity was not meant to know. In the end, the castle revealed just enough to tantalize, but never enough to solve its riddle. Each artifact, each scar, each symbol, was an echo of a forgotten time, a time when rulers may have gambled with eternity, and lost. Centuries have passed since the night the castle fell silent, yet even today it looms over the valley like a scar in the landscape, a shadow of stone and mist. Its towers, half broken but unyielding, rise above the forest canopy, visible from miles away. Travelers who pass through the region still stop to stare, some out of fascination, others out of dread. Locals avoid it. For them, the castle is not a monument of history, but a wound that never healed. They tell stories of hikers who vanished within its walls, their belongings later found at the gates but with no sign of the people themselves. Farmers say that livestock refuses to graze near the hill where the castle stands, as if the animals sense something humans cannot. The government, aware of the legends, but unable to explain the strange preservation of the site, has long debated whether to open it to the public. On rare occasions, teams of researchers are allowed inside, but never for long. Reports often speak of failing equipment, drained batteries, or recordings filled with static and whispers. One team even claimed that their watches stopped ticking the moment they entered, only to resume the instant they left. For outsiders, the castle has become a point of obsession. Paranormal investigators film documentaries, their cameras capturing fleeting shadows, unexplainable sounds, and strange flickers of light in windows that should be empty. Some swear they've seen faces pressed against the glass, pale, silent, watching. To historians, the castle remains a puzzle. No records exist of its rulers. No maps mention its lands. It is as though the dynasty was deliberately erased, their legacy scrubbed from every archive and scroll. Yet the walls still stand, stubborn and defiant, as if daring time itself to erase them. And so the castle endures, caught between legend and reality. By day, it is a ruin of stone and silence. By night, it becomes something else, a place where shadows move without cause, where footsteps echo in halls no living man walks, and where the wind carries faint strains of music that died centuries ago. Today, the locals call it the castle where time stopped. They lower their voices when they speak its name, for fear the walls themselves might hear. And perhaps, in some strange way, the castle does hear. Perhaps it remembers, and perhaps it is waiting for time to begin again. The final rays of sunlight stretched across the castle's weathered walls, casting long, uneven shadows that seemed to move on their own. Here, in this place where centuries had left almost no mark, time itself appeared to have surrendered. The air was thick with the scent of moss, aged wood, and stone that had witnessed countless untold stories. Visitors who stumbled upon the castle often spoke of a strange sensation, a whisper in the wind, a chill that touched the soul, as if the castle remembered everyone who had walked its halls. Walking through the grand hall, one could almost hear the echoes of long-forgotten conversations, the clatter of distant footsteps, and the hushed murmurs of lives once lived. Portraits hung crookedly on the walls, their subjects frozen in expressions of joy, sorrow, and contemplation. Their eyes seemed to follow you, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to keep their stories alive. In the courtyard, the fountain remained dry, yet the faintest trickle of water seemed to flow at night, as if the castle itself defied the rules of reality. Legends about the castle were whispered in nearby villages, stories of a time's curse, of a lord who had attempted to cheat mortality, of a bride who vanished on her wedding day and whose laughter could still be heard echoing through the empty chambers. Scholars and adventurers alike tried to rationalize these tales, offering explanations of clever architecture, trapped acoustics, and overactive imaginations. Yet, no matter how much logic they applied, something about the castle resisted reason. Time here was not measured in hours or days, but in moments frozen and memories preserved. Stepping into the highest tower, the wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it fragments of the past. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep purple and gold. Shadows lengthened, stretching into the corners of the castle where the light had never reached. It was here, amidst the silence, that one could truly feel the weight of centuries pressing gently against the spirit. The castle did not merely exist, endured, a living testament to the fragile boundary between legend and reality. As night fell, the castle's presence grew almost tangible. The stones seemed to hum with the energy of lives suspended in time, reminding anyone who listened that history was not always linear. It lingered, stubborn and persistent, refusing to fade into obscurity. Here, memory and myth intertwined, creating a haunting tapestry that would remain long after the last visitor had left. In its stillness, the castle whispered a profound truth. Some places are not meant to be understood, only felt, and so, the forgotten castle stands, eternal and enigmatic, a monument to the moments humanity has lost, and a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Time refuses to move on here, but perhaps, in its refusal, it preserves a story far greater than history itself.